Teachers, professors of Reddit, what's the worst thing you have ever had a student unironically turn in? My favorite was a research paper about Black Panthers, literal four-legged Black Panthers, for a paper about the color of water. A book that touches on family, education, and race, including the Black Panther political group. Apparently the student did not read the book or pay much attention to the classroom discussions. I also especially like it when they copy and paste from different websites without changing the fonts. Student literally plagiarized about 2 pages of a book I had written. As if I wouldn't notice. One of my friends in grad school had sold her papers to an online paper mill as an undergrad to make ends meet. One of her students in grad school bought one of her papers and turned it into her. This is on me and I know it. I teach 6th grade and had taught about citing sources but not about reliability. Had a student turn in a science paper whose entire source list was Phineas and Ferb episodes. An essay completed by his mom, who had done his written work for years. According to other teachers. In the parent-teacher interview I told her I believe the essay was likely plagiarized as it did not match the level of work that her son completed in class. However, the essay itself was so poorly written that there was no point in pursuing a lower grade than he had already received. Her husband gave her an all-knowing side-eye grimace and she turned bright red. Kid went on to fail my exam with a 4%. It takes a lot of ducking work to get a 4% on an exam. During student presentations once, I had to stop class to pull aside one of the students for mocking a dyslexic classmate for his spelling errors. Then, my random name picker selected rude student next. He plugs his computer into the projector and starts presenting. And the rest of the class immediately starts snickering. Rude student hadn't done the assignment at all. He had copied another student's file off of the lab computers and hoped I wouldn't notice. He had copied his dyslexic classmate's file. Spelling errors and all. He got a 0 and a discipline referral. I was grading anatomy papers once and a male college student mislabeled the vag as a pen 15. I had someone else call the pectoralis major muscle that goes over the chest area the titimus major. That same kid also called the quadriceps the quadricicle. I had one male student mislabel appendix as the clitoris. So many good jokes came from this one. Also I should point out that all of these were on accurate anatomical models. So these were especially bad mistakes. I had a kid turn in a Wikipedia article as a research paper. He wrote the intro and conclusion. But the rest of it still had footnote numbers and, somehow, a slightly shaded background. These people doing a 30-minute group presentation copy-pasted all their slides. You could tell because they had that grey background highlight on all the text and a mess of different fonts within the same slides. It also ended up being like 5 minutes instead of 30. So they didn't even copy-paste enough. I taught technical drawing. One of the kids was getting suspended for a week. He asked me for work he could take home. Since he couldn't do work using the software at home. Because he didn't have a computer. I gave him a stack of worksheets pertaining to the AutoCAD software and told him to take a book off the shelf. The guy came back later after his suspension was over and turned in some of the craziest worksheets I'd ever seen. I told him, not one of these answers is right. The kid got all upset. He said, they all came straight out of the book. Then he showed me the book. It was Norton's Anthology of English Literature. The students were asked to create a video for their final assignment talking about global warming. Or something related to it. They were promised extra credit if they got a lot of people to watch the video. The idea behind this was to spread awareness and to incentivize high quality work. One student created a black screen video. Put it on YouTube with a clickbait title. And spammed it around the internet. He ended up with enough extra credit to get an A in the class. Wife of a professor. College kids being unable to distinguish between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans on a map quiz. And did you know Chicago was one of the original 13 colonies? For the first major research project in college I had to work with a randomly assigned student. She didn't participate in any of the data collection or even really understand the protocol we were using. But the icing on the cake was that she word for word plagiarized her section of our paper from the example our professor had given us, which was an article he had written. No surprise. He noticed. I'll always remember the time students had the assignment to write something creative. We'd covered poems, short stories, stuff like that. Even a diary or journal entry would have worked. It was a real softball of a homework assignment. A couple kids clearly phoned it in and that's annoying. But one kid decided to plagiarize Bob Marley lyrics as an original poem. Dude, you could have written 2 paragraphs about how you like that song. And we're all good. Now I have to drag you out in the hall because plagiarizing is a big deal and can get him in trouble with administration. That's over my head. Just felt bad all around. And I was a new teacher at the time and had never had to deal with it before. Seriously people. Just half-ass your homework or take the 0. If you don't want to do it, don't cheat. Once you cheat, stuff is out of my hands. And there's no way it's worth it on a dumb one-off assignment. A mostly blank final exam with a poem on the back about how they were worthless and a failure. Yep. I've turned in a blank exam once or twice during my college career. It's the most debilitating feeling one could ever feel. Especially after studying for several days for it. As a university TA, I had the joy of marking an in-class essay that started out as a normal one, but turned into pages of rap lyrics. And no, it wasn't a witty answer to the question. And finally, I marked a test that was covered in red ink drawings of middle fingers and this class is stupid. The funny part was they did okay on the test. Straight up pages long plagiarism from the internet always comes off as pretty stupid. Why does this keep happening? Are kids brain damaged? The kids are either that stupid, that lazy, or think that their teachers are that stupid. My husband is a professor. He had a student would consistently turn in papers covered in coffee stains. The last straw was when the student turned in another coffee-coated assignment with the pages all stuck together and kind of lumpy. On prying the pages apart, it was discovered a coffee stirrer had somehow gotten sandwiched in there. The assignment was returned, ungraded. This gave me a flashback to 4th or 5th grade music class. We had some recital but I was going to miss it because I had a baseball game that night. Teacher said to make up the points I had to write a paper about a musician. Copy and pasted the entire Wikipedia page about Beethoven including citations and pictures. Teacher must not have cared because I got full points. I cringe just thinking about it. I did this in a high school humanities class run by a football coach who clearly hated his mandatory 1 hour of teaching. He literally put on random movies and had us write an essay about them. I realized pretty early that he didn't read anything I wrote and just gave decent looking essays 100s. So I started printing Wikipedia articles, minus the citation brackets. He even held my paper up to the class as an example of someone who gets things done because I was the only one that printed their essay. I edited a paper when I was a tutor where the author claimed that the song ABC by the Jackson 5 was educational. She argued that the whole purpose of the song was to teach children their ABCs and 123s purely because it had the letters ABC and numbers 123 in it. I made her listen to the song twice and tried to strongly convince her otherwise. But she kept insisting it was educational. So she turned it in that way. In high school the administration came up with some stupid senior assignment and forced all 12th grade English teachers to assign it. My teacher thought it was dumb too so he gave everyone an A. Well, everyone but me. Because I didn't do it. A week after it was due he was like just turn something in so I did less than 10% of it and turned it in. He gave me a B+. My last class to get my master's was an independent study. I waited until I was done with the rest of my coursework to get started. And I started to realize it would be a lot more work than I had realized. I think the outgoing chair of the department, my advisor, had underestimated the amount of work he had assigned. I got maybe 3/4 of the way done. but then got a job offer, teaching high school. I wrote my advisor an email, attaching the 3/4 of the work, asking if he'd be willing to give me a C so I could get the degree. Because with a full-time job, it was very unlikely I'd have time to finish. He gave me an A. I had a student in a graduate physics course turn in all the printed solutions with his name on it. He had the audacity to ask for a B+ so he didn't get kicked out of his program, lol. As an English teacher, I had a child turn in a creative writing piece that was pretty much the entire plot of Alien. When confronted with his plagiarism, he said he'd thought I wouldn't realize because it was a really old movie and women don't watch movies like that. Senior students were asked to submit a creative response to a prompt. The prompt was an image of a group of people collaborating over a map. I expected stories in the vein of treasure hunting, since we were reading short stories with that as the theme. One student turned in a 4-page creative essay about bestiality and gang rape because that's what they were plotting. Needless to say, he was sent to the counselor's office. Not a teacher, but I remember my 9th grade English teacher was returning essays we had written. When she got to the student behind me, she handed his back with a post-it note attached that had a web address written on it. In front of the entire class, she looks at this kid and says, "This is the website you copied your entire essay from." Only time I ever enjoyed that class. I had a student turn in a paper on Jim Crow laws that used the N-word several times. I had to explain why that word wasn't appropriate for a school paper. Was the student quoting passages which contained the N-word? Or did they just casually use it in their paper and not see anything wrong with it? Just casually using the word. Claimed he had no idea it was wrong. He was 16 and from the ghetto, so maybe he was telling the truth. My students use the word a lot. I used to be a special education teacher. I told a student to sign here after the IEP meeting. After the student and parent left, I gathered the papers. He literally signed here. Student had an IQ of low 80s and was not aware of such things being funny. I'm family and consumer science teacher, home ec. I had a student staple together their sewing project. They had actually completed a beautifully constructed pencil pouch, 7th grade, but was too lazy to empty out the pencil pouch because they had already started using it. I give one homework assignment in my 8th grade course. Make a meal at home or sign up to make one for a few teachers after school. This kid signs up to make one after school. Gives me an ingredient list. It's just packs of ramen. No other ingredients. He promised it would be the best thing we ever would eat. I was the student here, but sophomore year of high school I took AP World History, and at the end of the year, on the AP exam, there was an essay question asking you to detail some great migration in history. Like the Irish to America because of the famine or slavery, etc, etc. Now, the question did not give those examples and I left it for last. And it did not state human migrations. When I got to it I had 15 minutes left and drew a complete mental blank. I couldn't think of anything. So I wrote a 2-page essay about bird migrations and how they flew south for the winter or whatever. A lot of it was BS because I didn't know anything really about bird migration. After the exam I told my teacher and she whacked me over the head. She had a jovial relationship with all of us. Everyone loved her. Results came and I still passed with a 3. I assume I got a 0 on that essay, but secretly hope the grader had a sense of humor. When I was in year 11, as part of our GCSE preparation we sat mock exams as practice. In my English language mock, one of the tasks was to write a short story. So I wrote a shitty Star Wars fanfiction. I still remember when I got it back. My teacher commented, "You wrote an impressive amount given the available time." Gave me a C overall and told me to not do that for the real thing. During standardized testing, MCAS, classmate of mine was asked to write an essay on a piece of literature he read that talked about war. He made up a story called The Big War, and he wrote down a different classmate's name as the author. Surprisingly, he didn't get caught. I used to teach computer science in university. I had a number of code submissions where the student just wrote pseudocode. If you aren't familiar with programming, think literally writing something like add 2 and 2 together, then show the result art. I think they had someone else try and help them, so they put step-by-step instructions in comments, then tried to just uncomment that and turn it in. Worse, one student I had actually said it worked on their machine. No. Jared. No, it did not. A student was absent on the day a worksheet was due. I graded and returned the worksheets pretty quickly. When the student in question returned, she turned in another student's already graded worksheet. How? You might ask. Did she hope to pull this off? She tore off the original student's name, wrote her own name elsewhere on the paper, and then used black ink to scribble over all the red ink on the worksheet, underlining circles, X's, the grade, in hopes that I wouldn't notice I already graded it. Sadly, she was a dim enough bulb that the resultant 0 had negligible effect on her grade. My ex-wife received a research paper 100% copy and paste from the internet, including all the underlined hyperlinks, and claimed it was all original, even though she found the original website and presented it to the student. He claimed his computer was hacked and someone posted his essay to the site and was highly offended to the accusation. I had a student I was desperately trying not to fail who still owed me 2 2,000-word papers towards the end of the semester. I had a couple of conversations and multiple rounds of email with him. After a month plus of this, I received an email with the subject line, "Here are both papers," or words to that effect. I opened it and was confused because there were no attachments. Eventually, I figured out that he had typed the contents of the papers into the email. Not standard practice, but I would have let it go out of mercy. The reason it took me so long to figure this out was that I literally skimmed over the contents of each paper thinking they were part of the email header and indented text in the reply. He had written 1 sentence for each paper. The 2 sentences were 14 words in total. That person is not in college anymore. Not a teacher, but a girl I knew in high school had to do a report on the framers of the Constitution. Came back with a research paper on farmers of the Constitution. Literally wrote about farming in that time period. Not a teacher, but my friend was a student teacher in a not great district. She assigned a 2-3 page paper and a couple students sent her an email with a paragraph in the body of the email that was their paper. They were seniors. That really opened my eyes up to how the school system fails a lot of students. Here's a different one. Doesn't quite fit, but I'm gonna go for it anyway. I teach pre-K, 4-5-year-olds, and I had a little girl completely explode last week. Sheet literally everywhere. So of course first priority is to get all the other children away from the area. Second priority is to get the child cleaned up. Failed. It was so bad. And I don't help children in the restroom besides handing them things. I don't help clean them up. So we had to call mom cause this girl had to be showered, and third priority is making sure she isn't totally embarrassed and scarred by this happening at school in front of her friends. No issue there. She wasn't embarrassed at all. Super stoked she got the rest of the day off. I am not a teacher nor a professor, but I've heard it from a friend of mine that is a teacher. German lessons where the students had to turn in an essay written in German. The student uses Google Translate, and instead of choosing Deutsch, he chooses Dutch. Not a teacher, but in high school my PE teacher liked to assign us essays about sports, but the thing was she never read them. She just gave random marks favoring her favorite students. Once a kid turned in an essay about flies when it should be about korfball. He had 17 out of 20. My essay about actual korfball scored 14 out of 20. Kids were making presentations. They could do poster boards or PowerPoints or anything. Neatness and creativity counted 4 points. Kid turns in a poster board with loose leaf stapled to it. I couldn't read his handwriting. It was really sad. I've told this one before in a similar thread, but I was a TA in a computer science lab. Had a student turn in a program that wouldn't compile. Why? because when they copied and pasted the program, they also included the email header at the top. So they accidentally ratted out themselves. 2 other students the program was emailed to, and the guy who sent it to them. The thing was, I was there to give the students any help they needed. I would have helped them line by line. Ah well.